Yeah, g'day, this is Corey, and this is a long form video of how I make some crazy wacky necks. There's a few things that you'll need is timber, contrasting timber. If you don't have enough contrast, it's not going to look the way that this will turn out. You can have a bandsaw, thickness planer, thickness sander, joiner, all them will help, but ultimately you can do this with a lot of time, a lot of hard work and a lot of patience. If you don't have any of those tools I mentioned, you'll need a nice flat surface so you can sand everything down flush. You'll need a handsaw, a jigsaw, hand plane maybe, a router even to knock like edges off, like I did with the bandsaw. I knocked the top edge because it was rounded off just before, and what I'm doing there is just flattening them out. These boards that I get have oil on them, so I run them through the sander or the thicknesser to get rid of the oil so you can glue it together. And it's totally doable without the tools that I have. Even with the tools I have though, it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. And I can understand why people don't do this style of neck, where I've got a bit of time at the moment, so that's why I'm doing them, and told Daniel that I'd do one up for his Luffy's lunch break, and I ended up doing two up. I needed to cut a sliver off these pieces that I've just ran through the bandsaw. The idea here is I'm going to make the thickness up with the contrasting wood, because I want all the boards the same thickness so you get the same look up the neck. I cut these in half, so essentially I get twice as much pattern, but not really when you think about it. I just cut them in half because easier to glue up. Let's go with that one, because the boards are 90 millimeters wide, so you'd need to put clamps on two sides of the board, where I only had enough clamps for one side. And this is the accent pieces, so I'm just gluing them up. You'll see two bits of the lighter wood back to back. I didn't obviously glue them because they'd glue together, so I just placed them on top and glued them all at the same time. So for the last crazy neck I made, I ended up doing this jig up, which is some melamine screwed at a 90-degree angle so I could clamp in two directions. And this really helps, because otherwise the boards will creep out of line and it's really hard to get a nice straight glue up. I mean, you can index pin it, but at the same time, if you do index pins, you lose that chunk of wood where you've put the pin through. And yeah, you need lots of tight bond. Well, not necessarily tight bond, but it's tight bond's all I'll use. And I use a little foam roller to spread it all out. And with these ones, the contrasting piece was going on the outside of that piece. And then this piece that I'm gluing up now, the contrast bit's going to go just off center. And my thinking with this is, if I need them to appear on the other side of the neck, I'll just flip the board over and then it'll be on the other side of the neck and you'll get that contrast. So what I'm doing here is cutting down the little bit of excess that did manage to overhang. It's not much. Then I run it through the planer again. As I said, you can do this without a thicknesser and a sander, but this saves a lot of time, and I don't even own a hand plane, so I use what I got, which I'm lucky to have what I have, but at the same time, it's doable. It really is, but it's whether anybody wants to put the time in to make these necks, like I do. So here I'm gluing the accent pieces onto the neck. It's just an idea that I had. As you can see, there's different contrasts in the timber that I chose between the Merbau and the spotted gum. But to have them glued together, I didn't think it was going to be enough of a contrast. But the whole idea with this neck was to have a piece look like it was randomly floating up the neck. And I will do it, but I didn't do it this time. I ended up just having like a checkerboard piece go up the neck diagonally and then change directions and then go up again. And right here I am gluing up timber for the scarf joint in the heel. I don't know if you call this a multi-scarf neck or a mega scarf neck or whatever, but it all starts with this one piece of wood here. And when I do glue ups, I level it all off so I can start again, so it doesn't compound if a piece is out. I've done it in the past where I've glued and glued and glued, and then you end up with the pieces out of a line, or so much waste on the top you have to freehand cut it on the bandsaw to get it flat again, and then take it to the joint and pray that it's going to come out straight. What I'm doing here now is cutting. Essentially what I had was 4 neck lengths that could have been like a Strat style neck, but I'm cutting these into fingerboard sizes, and I call these pieces tiles because I just lay them on top of each other, alternate the pattern, and that's how you get the look that you get when you see these fancy necks that I do. And right now I'm cutting a 15-degree, well, I'm not cutting, I'm marking up the scarf, and end up cutting it in half pretty much, put it on the sander, get it nice and flat so I can start gluing the tiles to it. I ended up with 2 scarves, and I wasn't sure if this neck was going to work, so I made a backup neck just in case it fucked up. So this is what I mean by you need plenty of glue, and you know, glue's got to take time to set, so you need patience. I mean, you could take the clamps off after an hour or half an hour, but I wouldn't trust it. I keep it clamped up as at least 6 hours to 12 hours to even overnight, depending, and level everything off. It's easy to level the sides off on the planer, and then the top and the bottom pieces of these stepped out blanks is nice and flat anyway. So here I'm cutting the first tile because I glued them all together. It just makes less glue up in the jig later on down the track. So I cut this tile out, glue it on, and then when I cut the next tile out, I flip the board over so I can get the other end and the pattern to continue the way I want it to go. So making this jig, it's simple. It's simple. I just screwed 2 bits of board together, well, 3 bits if you see that I've got that piece doubled up, and it keeps it relatively flat. Cutting angles in, there's always going to be like a slight little gap at one end, so that's why I take it to the sander and I run it through and get it all nice and flat. And while you're looking, I have tape on my pockets because when I route stuff, sawdust gets everywhere, and it's really annoying if you're wearing a jumper and you're going down the street or whatever and put your hand in your pocket and you feel all wood chips in there. So this is the other end of the blank that I glued up, and putting it in the jig again, clamp it 2 ways. I use a plexi template just so I know the length that I need. And normally what I'll do too is I'll add a bit of an accent into the scarf joint for the headstock. And I had one leftover tile. It was a bit thinner than the rest, so I ended up sanding that down, and then you'll see in a second that I get on the bandsaw, cut it all up, and then arrange it into the pattern. And then I'll glue it together, so I don't have to talk over that bit. With the amount of time it takes to make these necks, I don't expect everyone to do them. I don't expect anyone to do them. I'm just sort of giving a bit of insight in how I go about it. I'm doing this for Devil & Sons Lufia's lunch break, and this is probably the only thing I figure that I could talk about, because this is my 4th neck that's been like a mega laminate sort of deal, mega scarf. This here is the headstock. I thought it'd be nice to have a piece that's like the rest of the neck, so the pattern continues to go up the neck. Anyway, Daniel has these little, he calls it a magazine type show. It's like brief things where people have topics that they talk about, little handy hints to help aspiring guitar builders, which I think is great, because, you know, we're all in this together, and I don't know, like, we should be helping people out. It doesn't need to be the way it is sometimes on Facebook and shit. Anyway, I decided with these necks I'm going to use an offcut as the fretboard, which is a bit of pain in the ass down the track, but I thought, you know what, let's do it. So I cut 10mm off this one and sanded it flat again and got it ready for the scarf to go on. So what I do here is I just clamp it straight to the bench because it's a lot easier. I have these support pieces underneath, so I can run clamps pretty much at a 45-degree angle to the corner of the bench. I clamp it straight down, clamp the other piece straight down too, and then clamp them together so they don't drift apart. Okay, so I glued the scarf down and then I put it in this jig. Well, it's just basically 4 boards glued together to get it all nice and flat, so the scarf's all good to go to glue the fretboard on. Cut the fret slots. This is the 25.5-inch scale neck. The other one is a 26.5, and cutting slots. Slots went well. It's just where the little scarf joints are. Some of them lifted, some of them chipped out. So I'm glad I left everything oversized. Just cutting up a couple of bits of burl for the headstock plates. And now I do the truss rod route. And I use a 6mm bit here or a 6.5, depending on how thick the heat shrink is on the truss rod. And then I use a 9.5mm bit at the headstock end underneath the nut because it widens out a little bit there, and that's just the size I use. It's a little bit wider than what I need, but that's more than fine. and I used 3mm bit for the carbon fibre, which is routed so the pieces will be flushed down into the top of the neck. So drop saw, cut it at a 90 degree again, and this was before I did the carbon fibre strips, and yeah, cut it up nice. So with the other neck I'm using aluminium flat bar. It's 3mm by 10, but I'm not sinking all that 10 into the neck because I have a feeling that I'd carve into it when I do the neck carving. So I ended up recessing it into the fingerboard as well, and this way it gives me a locating style. Well, it's not a locating pin, but it sort of, I guess it's called a key, is it? Oh, anyway, so I did that. I actually routed a little bit bigger just to make sure it all fit in the fretboard. So I did the fretboard ones at 4mm, and the rest of the aluminium was done at 3mm. Glued the ears on, and now I'm mixing up some resin for the headstock plates. And I end up bathing this in the blue. And that's going to be it for this one. So please like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, tell your mum, next door neighbour, and your local checkout chick. Anywho, part 2 will be out soonish. I've actually got to screen record it from YouTube because I don't have enough phone storage. So yeah, catch us later.